Joined at the podium by Mayor de Blasio, who will speak, Chief James O'Neill, Chief of Department, Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce, who will speak to the investigation into the murder of Police Officer Brian Moore. Police Officer Brian Moore died today from injuries sustained Saturday, May 2nd, when he confronted an armed felon in the 105th Precinct in Queens. For 4 years, he patrolled the streets of that borough in our city as a New York City police officer. He was decorated for his performance of duty, 150 arrests, 2 medals for meritorious police duty, 2 for excellent police duty, a remarkable record in such a short period of time. He prevented crime and disorder. He strove for a safer and fairer city. He was a cop. The loss of a police officer is always tragic. It taxes us immensely. But as a police department, we can take comfort in Officer Moore's example, in his bravery, in his selfishness. And as police commissioner, I tended to his family my heartfelt sorrow and the consolation that his service mattered and it will be remembered. I'd like to take this opportunity to extend some thank yous. JetBlue called this afternoon to indicate that they will once again, as they did during the funeral services for Detectives Lou and Ramos, offer free plane travel to any officer attending the funeral for Officer Moore. I'd like to extend heartfelt thanks to the New York City Fire Department as I accompanied the motorcade taking Officer Moore from Jamaica Hospital to Bellevue for the autopsy. Along the way, at every fire station and every overpass, the New York City Fire Department was there, all lined up, saluting as that procession went by. I'd like to also thank the many New Yorkers who also engaged in similar acts of remembrance, and also for their patience with the traffic tie-ups that procession caused. They were very patient with us, and I very much appreciate that in this time of sorrow for this department and this city. I just also got off the phone prior to this press conference with Queens District Attorney Richard Brown. He called to inform me that this matter will be put into the grand jury tomorrow, and he will seek an indictment for first-degree murder of a police officer. And I thank the district attorney for that. With that, I'd like to ask Mayor de Blasio, Bill de Blasio, to speak to you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, our city is in mourning. Our hearts are heavy. We lost one of New York's finest, and that phrase needs to be fully understood in this moment. We lost one of the best amongst us. Young man who was called to do good for others, to serve others, who was willing to put his life on the line. That is not most people. That is one of the finest amongst us who will do that. Officer Brian Moore made the ultimate sacrifice, just 25 years of age, courageous young man, and his service record proves it. He did everything a good police officer was supposed to do, and he was awarded many times for both his valor and his professionalism. He risked his life for a very simple notion: to keep everyone else safe, to keep our society safe, to keep order. This is what he wanted to do. I spoke with his father and other members of his family, and they talked about, on Saturday, they talked about how much his life was devoted to being a police officer in this police department, how this was his dream, because he had seen such extraordinary examples in his own family, and he wanted to be just as good as them. He lived out his dream. He emulated his father and his uncle, and he followed in their footsteps. Our hearts are with the Moore family. This is a family that has done so much for the rest of us, a family that deserved only the best and now is feeling the most profound pain and loss. And our hearts are with the entire extended family of the NYPD, because every member of this department, every former member of this department, is feeling the sense of loss and pain right now today. I want to also extend some thank yous to the extraordinary men and women of Jamaica Hospital who labored so intensely against the odds, did everything they knew how to do to help Officer Moore, and we thank them for their extraordinary efforts. It's a moment of loss. It's a time to focus on the Moore family. It's a time to support their healing, which will be long and difficult, but we need to be there for the Moore family, and we need to be thankful that there was a hero amongst us known as Brian Moore. Just a few words in Spanish. Hoy sentimos un gran pesar en nuestros corazones ante la pérdida del policía Brian Moore. Brian prestó servicio con distinción y arriesgó su vida cada día por la seguridad de todos. Los neoyorquinos estamos agradecidos por su servicio y debemos apoyar a la familia Moore como sea posible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An added thank you to Dr. Eli Kleiman, who is the department's chief surgeon, who helped to coordinate the care that was given to Officer Moore during the last 2.5 days at Jamaica Hospital. Doctor, thank you so much for your service as always. Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce will now give you an update on the criminal investigation that he has been leading. Bob.
Good evening. As been reported at 6:15 Saturday evening, Officer Moore was shot on 104th Place in Queens. Pursuant to that investigation, we arrested a Demetrius Blackwell, a 35-year-old male, approximately 7:30 that evening. Our investigation was aided dramatically by Officer Moore's partner. He identified that individual later on at the 105th Precinct Detective Squad directly thereafter, and we arrested him on that block. We have two witnesses who identify Mr. Blackwell running with a firearm directly after the shots. They hear 3 shots, and then they see him running on 104th Avenue, the next block over. He then retreats back into the backyards, and we apprehend him about, as I said, 7:30 in the evening. This morning at 9 o'clock, we recovered a Taurus Model 85 5-shot revolver in one of the backyards on 104th Road, which is where the shooting occurred. It is a Model 85. It has 3 spent rounds and 2 live rounds in its chamber. It's a 5-shot gun. We did some trace on it. We found that it is stolen out of Perry, Georgia on October 3rd of 2011. It was part of 23 guns that were stolen at a bait and tackle shop down in Georgia. 9 of those guns have since found its way on the streets of New York, and we made arrests in regards. That is what we have right now. As I said, the commissioner went forward and told you what the Queens District Attorney is going to do.
We're open for questions on topic only, please.
Commissioner, I have a question for you, and then I have a follow-up for the mayor. This police department has been through so much, especially since December. The troops were in mourning anyway over the 2 police officers that the department lost in December, and now this. What do you say to the men and women who are out there every single day dealing with this grief and shock?
Thank you. Thank you for doing what they do in the midst of the grief and tragedy. In addition to the murder over the weekend, that we also lost 2 other officers who passed away. That in fact, the 105 precinct was at the funeral this morning for another officer from the 105 precinct, and then left there immediately to go to the hospital where it was announced that Officer Moore passed away. No, we say thank you, that policing is never easy, and at this time in America, it's even more difficult. And their sacrifices and their hard work and dedication, we should also all be very, very thankful that we have so many men and women who are willing to, in the midst of the adversity that they face every day, the dangers that they face, clearly as evidenced by the events of Saturday night, go forth onto the streets and byways of this city and around the country and do great work. Over the weekend, in a conversation, I've been doing this now for almost 50 years, and it never gets easier, but there was a comment made, and I've heard this at every police death in those 50 years, 40 years, that why is it always the good ones? Well, maybe the reasons it's always the good ones is because there are so many good ones, that we pay a lot of attention and focus on the bad, and there are those, but they are the few. But thankfully, the vast majority are the good ones. So that's why that comment, when it's made at every police death, is usually about a good guy, because they are good guys and good guys and girls, good men and women.
Mr. Mayor, my question to you is, the news conference today at the hospital was about 2:30. On your schedule, you were speaking at a tech conference at noontime today in Newtown. And the question is, why wouldn't you have been at the hospital for this news conference to talk about this young man who made the ultimate sacrifice for this city?
First, I want to say, want to absolutely commend the point that Commissioner Bratton made. I've been to a number of these funerals already in my public service, and I've talked to a number of families who have lost someone who served us. And there are so many good police officers, so many who believed with everything in their being that it was their obligation to put their life on the line for others. And that, I emphasize, is a rare and special human being who makes that decision and then lives it out every day. In the case of Brian Moore, did it with tremendous energy and distinction. So there are so many good men and women who make this choice, and we are blessed. To your question, today, as people who know the extended family of the NYPD will say, today was a day for members of the NYPD to be together at that hospital. It was not a place, in my view, for elected officials.
I need to follow up on that. It's not your place to be at the hospital today as the leader of this city to speak on behalf of the city for a man who paid the ultimate price serving this city. I've been working here for 22 years, and I can't remember a time where a mayor wasn't at a hospital when they made the announcement that a police officer had passed. So there are many people asking that question.
Ma'am, we're happy to answer your question.
You should have been there.
We're happy to, yes, we're happy to answer your question. Again, I was at the hospital Saturday, and I've been at many such situations. I don't necessarily agree with your interpretation. I want to say this. This is about our commitment to our police officers. And in my view, it has been clear and consistent. This is something Commissioner Bratton and I talk about all the time, the things we need to do to support the men and women of this department. And I have been honored to stand by them in good times and bad, and I've done it many times, and I've done it in a way that was appropriate and in constant consultation with the leadership of this department.
Sticking with your response.
Ma'am, you've had two opportunities. Let's take other questions, please.
I can speak to this. It was on my advice that the mayor did not come to the hospital because of the uncertainty of the circumstances at the hospital during the morning, that it was not certain if the officer was going to pass or when he was going to pass. And when he did, that the idea was to, in dealing with the family, to try to move Officer Moore to Bellevue as soon as possible. So rather than delay to have the mayor come in from downtown out, it was my suggestion that, in fact, we would deal with the officer's departure from the hospital, which we did with great honor, and we did a press availability for you, at which we took no questions, and but did indicate that we would arrange this event this evening, which would allow both the mayor and I to express to the city, to the men and women of this department, that our thoughts relative to Officer Moore, which we will do once again at the wake on, my understanding is the wake may be Thursday one day and the funeral service probably on Friday, so that there will be opportunity at that time to also continue to express our sympathies to the family, as well as to the men and women that do so much for the city and the department. Thank you. I think I can speak to that. We have not spoken to any great degree about the details of the shooting event itself. That our focus has been very much on recovering that firearm the last 30-some-odd hours. We will have a briefing probably later this week. We try to usually do it within 72 hours of an event, a preliminary briefing, to make a determination as to the best of our understanding, what transpired. And so I would expect that at some point in time this week, we will have that to try and reconstruct very specifically what happened at that scene at that time. Certainly, Chief of Detectives can speak to what he's going to need to assist District Attorney Brown at that grand jury presentation, as well as for the filing of the charges. Bob?
Presently, we're lining up witnesses to testify at the grand jury. We have quite a few, as I said, from the community. I went on and said that we have 2 people who identified him. We also have other persons who saw him running through the yard and possibly could also testify to that fact as well. So at one point, he changed his clothing in the backyards. We made note of that. You saw him at arraignment with the Tyvek suit. That's because we took that evidence. We found that to be probative, and we vouched it. So that's some of the things we'll be introducing, as well as the gun and other persons in his life. We found now that he is estranged from everybody in his family. We're trying to locate exactly where he was living. We have one house that he spent at least 2 weeks in. He is from that neighborhood. This individual spent about 6 years in jail. He took his first arrest when he was 15 years old. He's been arrested for robbery 3 times. So, again, this is an ongoing investigation, and we'll go forward in that vein. Al?
Chief, which one?
Chief Boyce, the gun that was seized, you said that was a part of a haul of...
Yeah, this was 23 weapons that were stolen in October of 2011, 10 of which have been recovered, 9 of which have been recovered in New York City. Taurus 5-shot, easily concealed. We have one of the witnesses who actually sees a silver weapon, and that's in line with what we thought initially.
Regarding the gun, can you tell us a little bit more about how it was found? Was it secreted somewhere, or was it hidden, and was it along the route in which the witnesses said he fled?
It was, Al, if you go through the backyards and you're hopping fences, which is what you need to do in Queens, to go from yard to yard, everything is fenced in. It is under a box near a grill, a barbecue grill. When we lifted the box, there it was. Right now, it was sent to the lab. It's being processed now for fingerprints, DNA, whatever we find.
Judge Brown told you that the charge would be murder of a police officer. Are you confident that Blackwell knew he was shooting at a cop when he opened fire?
One of the things left at the crime scene from our officers was his shield. I'm quite confident. It is a Ford Crown Victoria, commonly used by police officers all over the country. So yes, I am.
Chief, is there any video either of the shooting itself or subsequent to that running through the backyards? And is it possible to define any better the amount of time total counted for?
Right now, we have a police officer calling a 13. We are estimating the time comes at 6:15 in the evening. He calls a 13 directly thereafter. We do not have shot spotter in that area, so we don't get an exact timestamp. We do have him on video at certain parts, so I'm not going to go into it too much. I'll let the Queens DA go further into that. But we do have snippets, not of the crime itself, his running from it.
You say you have, Chief Boyce, you say you have witnesses that saw him running with the gun. Was there an opportunity to maybe check his hand or his body for any sort of gunpowder residue? Or
That was done. I'm not going to go into it, though. It was.
You mentioned that this is a difficult time to be a police officer, and this is, I think, by accounts of the reports, the 5th officer to be shot in 5 months. Can you put this into broader context? Did anything that has happened recently give rise to what you're seeing with the police force?
It would only be speculative, the idea that the tenor of the times in the country, this is, during my time now, next year will be 50 years I've been associated with law enforcement, and you'd have to almost go back, I think, to the late 60s, early 70s to see a time when there was so much anti-police sentiment in the country. And it is ironic that there was so much of that at this juncture, because over the last 20 years, and the city serves as the shining example, the men and women of law enforcement have made this country so much safer than it was after the chaos of the 70s and 80s. So it is ironic that a relatively small number of incidents that there are so many trying to take away from the hard work of the 850,000 American police officers who every day are still out there despite the very large amount of invective being thrown at them at this particular time, who, like Officer Moore and his partner, still out there very proactively working. I think you've seen just this past week in New York City, the idea of officers have been getting guns off the street from the subway system, from the parks, from the streets. They're certainly not stepping back, even as the profession, and many of them are being seemingly endlessly attacked. I'm privileged to lead what I think is the most professional police department in the United States at this juncture, and I was privileged to lead several others that also extraordinarily good. These are strange times, interesting times to say the least, but I've watched this pendulum swing back and forth, and it'll swing back the other way, guaranteed. One of the things we attempt to do after any of these incidents is to learn from it. Were there things that, as we do our investigation, that we can learn tactically, operationally, strategically? So we will do that with this. As you're aware, I'm in the process of creating a whole new entity, the Force Investigation Division, that will report to Commissioner Tucker. That entity, that is, I think, about 40 or 50 detectives, will assume the responsibility for the investigation of these use of force type of incidents. And the idea there is to significantly improve what is already a very high standard of investigation of officer-involved use of force. So these incidents that the new use of force unit has been at the events, but the events are still being controlled by the Chief of Detective's office at this junction. But we'll be transitioning to improve our ability to learn from each of these events. As to the events at the hospital, that there is, in terms of a number of points of time in medical areas in which, or medical terminology, that in particularly the events involving this instance, in which the exact time of death may be, in fact, several different times, depending on the medical terminology. So that's why we're not in the position at this moment till we get the full death certificates, et cetera, to give you that definitive time.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, folks.
Okay, thank you.